I'm Edward Ed Smith, and you're listening to the Monologues of a Cryptid Writer, Volume 1. The purpose of this series is to give you, the listener, some idea of why I got into these stories, and also to hopefully entice future writers to begin their own tales of terror and fanciful enjoyment. I would like to thank Luke for his committed effort to make his channel what it is today, and I am grateful to him for allowing me the chance to take 15 minutes or so to provide some insight into what I like to call my lucid lavishness. I never had a Class A sighting of my own, of any of the creatures that I write about. I have had 2 Class B sightings, that is to say, I felt I was in the presence of something great unknown. So I'll start with the first one, and we'll cover the second one in a future volume. In June of 1978, a member of my family had a partnership in a float trip rental operation on the Illinois River here in Oklahoma, in the vicinity of the town, or now city, of Tahlequah. In the summer, I was baling hay for my uncle around my home in South Bixby, Oklahoma, and during the weekends I would go and help my aunt and my other uncle at their float operation. At the age of 16, it was nice to be outside, a lot. It was on one of these weekends when some of the floaters came up missing. They really didn't come up missing, they just got drunk, tired, and beached themselves. So my buddy and I was tasked to go out and find them. Long story short, we eventually found them, but we didn't have the canoe trailer hooked up to the truck. So we loaded the floaters into the cab and the bed of the truck, and my buddy drove them back to the rental office. And I told him that I would take the canoes downstream to the office, which was little more than 3 miles by river. I had a walkie-talkie that did work, if someone was actually listening to it. When we found our missing floaters, it was about 7:10 p.m. It was late June, so it stayed daylight up until about 8:20. But I knew it was going to be dark by the time I got back to the office. No biggie. The strange part about this weekend was that there was very few floaters left on the river, and this was a Saturday night. I lashed the 6 canoes together, 4 across and 2 together, and in front of the 4 I made sort of a catamaran. This way I could steer from the back and gauge how to avoid snags in the river. The river was up about 5.5 feet, which is great floating levels for the Illinois. After about an hour and a half, I got tired of paddling and just settled into allowing the river to move me back down to the office. The going was slow, but I was moving. And while I was slowly passing a large patch of river reeds, just as I was coming up on the area known as Goat's Bluff, this is a 3-level sheer cliff that stretched for maybe 4 football fields. It was a place where college kids and locals sometimes came to party and hang out. And being a Saturday night, I thought I might tie up to the shore and scale up the cliffs and see what was happening. I got to the top of the cliff, where you could usually find some group of people partying, but no one was there, and there was a fire still burning. You could see where a group was, but not there anymore. And an ice chest, not a styrofoam one, but a real Coleman ice chest, was left there as well. I thought that was odd, but, well, I opened it, and yes, for my reward, there was 1 beer left in cold water. So being the fine, upstanding individual that I was back then, I took it. I dumped the water from the chest on the burning fire and started back down the trail and rock ledge that I had to negotiate in order to get back to the river. I put the beer bottle in my back pocket because I'm not climbing down this cliff at night even with a light buzz. That was just not happening. Once I got back down to the large area of reeds in which my canoe catamaran had drifted into and become tangled, I jumped into the reeds and got a hold of the edge of the canoe and started to push it back out of the reeds. I was in waist-deep water, when I heard a sound like something jumping from the cliff level just above the sloping bank down to the bank, and it sounded like it landed on 2 feet, with a small stumble and a shuffle immediately after it landed. I looked back and called out, "Hello," in that direction, but no answer. So I went back to pushing the canoes back into the main water, and the river was flowing nicely. And then the proverbial hair went up on the back of my neck. I turned, and all I could see was reeds and the moonlight dancing off the water. But I swear, folks, something was in those reeds looking at me, and I could not see it. I hopped up in the canoe, paddled my way into the river, and started down the river again. But the feeling of being watched did not leave me until I was about a mile plus some down the river, where it got a little more populated from other floater operations and campsites north of Camp Lutheroma. I never saw anything, but I would swear something was there, less than 40 feet from me. And yes, there was an odd odor in the air, one that I never recognized on this river before. And that was my first so-called encounter. And now I'd like to offer some insight into my first story I ever wrote. And that was my I will never go bow fishing without my gun story. It was inspired by my first bow fishing trip at night. Now, nothing happened but great fishing, but it did get my imagination moving, as those of you who have listened to that story can probably attest to. Now I've got plenty of future stories. I have many that I've outlined and begun writing some on too, and it's just a process. I go from one to the other to the other. But the next adventure I'm going to take you guys on is something I call, or is entitled, I Inherited a Floating House in a Cypress Swamp. This will be my next story that gets released. It will be a standalone tale. I always wanted to live in a floating house, and since Oklahoma, yes, Oklahoma has cypress swamps, down in southeastern Oklahoma, in McCurtain County, near Idabel, in the Little River National Wildlife Refuge. And my story takes place in between the most western boundary of the refuge and North Central Road, a road that goes north out of Idabel, and the ever-infamous Holly Creek. Stay tuned for that one. The next future story will be entitled, Something's Killing Wild Hogs in My Uncle's Cornfield. This will be my next endeavor after the floating house. Everybody loves a good terror, horror field story about a cornfield. I know I do. Trust me, this could become a multi-part series. I would like to take this time to appeal to my peer authors here at the channel to start their own monologue. Even if they can't voice it themselves, write it and someone will voice it. It's something that I think is important, not only for the channel itself, but for the listener to know how we're influenced and how we're wired as writers, what got us to where we're at now and today and the future. I think it's important because it helps future writers to say, I thought about that myself. Why didn't I do that? Now that they can go do it. Well, there it is, Volume 1. I hope it was informative and entertaining. Please like and share, and let us know how you liked or disliked this volume in the comments box. And oh, by the way, before I forget, tell us how you liked Luke's premiere performance as Luke the Mule in the 8 Men of Ape Canyon story. I thought he did a spectacular job. But you know how Hollywood works. I hope he doesn't get typecast. Until next time, lock your doors and windows, as if that's going to help keep them out tonight. We're going to need a better plan.